Good morning, everybody. It is the day before. It is the day before. We have 1 day left until the start of the 2023 NFL Draft. And we got to summarize what went down last night because last night we had a lot of fun on stream. One point had about 300 people on stream, consistently 200 or so, pretty much the whole night. And we did mock draft simulations on various sites. We ended up doing 11 mock draft simulations across 6 different sites. Spent about 2.5 hours on stream going through all the possibilities, making a bunch of different picks, doing some trading, doing some experimenting, trying to mess around with this draft to figure out what are the best possible scenarios. So I've got 11 mock drafts saved, and we're going to go over them because I understand that people who watch my videos may not want to go through a 2.5 hour long stream trying to find all the mocks we did. If you weren't able to partake last night, you may just want to see, okay, let's see the end result. Like, understand that there were a lot of conversations and discussions and even some polls that decided what we would do at each pick in these different mocks. But at the end of the day, I think it's good to have a summary at the end showing what you actually did. And understand that every mock that we do is to a certain extent experimental. I don't want to take the same players in every mock. I don't want to pursue the exact same positional needs in every mock. I don't want to look at every mock in the same way. So I come at things from different angles. I approach the draft from varying angles. So each of these 11 drafts should be at least somewhat different from all the others. Now, I'll say this. I actually don't believe I ever had a mock draft where I couldn't get at least one of Jalen Carter or Will Anderson at 5. So because of that, my desire to trade down was low, and I didn't do a lot of trading down. It also doesn't help that on a lot of these sites, trading down is a little bit of a mess and often produces very flawed and skewed results. So I tried to hold off of it because, I could produce the greatest draft in NFL history pretty easily if I wanted to manipulate trading. But, I'm trying to stay away from that. I'm trying to actually have an honest draft that at least contains a kernel of realism. So I didn't do as much trading as I would have liked to have necessarily done, especially trading back from 5, which, looking back on it, I would have liked to have done a little bit more because I do think trading back from 5 is a realistic and tempting possibility. But nevertheless, let's go through the 11 mock drafts. This first one I think ended up going fairly well. The only position that I really neglected was linebacker. But with the needs the Seahawks have and with the considerations of this draft, there's just probably going to be at least one position where we're going to have to go a little bit needy this year. And linebacker's not a bad one given the fact that we did patch a hole over the problem by bringing in Bobby Wagner and Devin Bush. And still maybe being able to get something out of Jordan Brooks this year. But other than that, I got a couple of halfbacks. Backfield is taken care of. I brought in another edge that I really, really like. I brought in 2 nose tackles, who I'm into. Brought in a receiver who can play inside and outside. I brought in a center of the future cornerback for Carroll to develop. I brought in a guard for next year. And, of course, I improved the defensive end position, even though I didn't get to double up here. I did manage to get he's mostly considered to be the best defensive lineman in this draft, so you can't go too wrong with that. A lot of people objected to taking a running back in the first round, but I'm telling you guys, Bijan's different. Okay, normally I would agree with you. Normally I would say, I'm not going to take a guy like who was the Najee Harris. I'm not going to take a Najee Harris in the first round. He's not good enough. I'm not going to take a Rashad Penny in the first round. He's not good enough. Not saying those guys are bad. They're not. But I'm not taking them in the first. Bijan is built differently. But pretty happy with the way this one turned out overall. PFF liked it a good amount. They didn't like the Rajon Wright pick, but that's a crowd pleaser right there. Seahawks fans, I think, are going to like Rajon Wright. He's got the Carroll cornerback attributes. And overall, I found myself very happy with this draft. Maybe you could say instead of Felix, I should have taken a linebacker, but I really like Felix, guys. Okay, so next up we have another PFF mock draft. This one, I switched it up a little bit. I took Will Anderson, number 1, at number 5 overall, and PFF loved that. They gave that pick an A+. And then things got a little bit funky from there. At round 1, pick 20, I took Cansey, and later on in the draft, I also took Benton. So those were the guys that I brought in to improve my defensive line. Probably did not do enough. As much as I like Cansey and Benton, you probably needed one more guy, either another nose tackle or another end. But that was really all I was able to do in this draft. Then I took Darnell Washington at 37. And you may notice a little bit lower, I did trade Noah Fant. Now, Darnell Washington, another absolutely positively awesome crowd pleaser. PFF didn't love the pick that I made. But I believe that Darnell Washington's one of the best players in this draft. But when you take a guy like him, you're not really doing a lot to address your direct needs. So things got a little bit murky from there. I took Joe Tippmann in round 3, which I love. I love Joe Tippmann. I think Joe Tippmann is awesome. And by the way, I got that pick because I traded the pick that I got with Noah Fant and my 3rd round pick to get back up close to the 2nd round. So I didn't want to trade Fant for a pick and then just use the pick. I wanted to use that pick to trade up because I don't want to have too many rookies and then have a problem paying them. I want to reduce that problem as much as possible. We're already going to have a hard enough time paying our number 5 overall pick. I don't need to compound the problem by adding on more rookie contracts if I can avoid it. I'd rather have the better picks. Charlie Jones, one of my favorite receivers in this draft. He really grew on me as time went by. I addressed halfback in the last part of the draft, and I brought in a couple Alabama guys as well. Improved my guard depth. So, offensive line looking good. And, yeah, I like this one. I was able to address the running back problem without spending massive capital on it. I was able to bring in some depth along the offensive line, as well as 2 guys who I think will be future starters. And I brought in a guy in the 4th round who I think will be able to play the slot in the NFL immediately. Okay, so now we're moving on to another site. We're doing PFN, probably the cleanest mock draft simulator on the internet. This one was the let's go nuts on the defensive line draft. This was Jalen Carter after a trade down. I traded down from 7, and I got Jalen Carter anyway. Then I traded from 20 to 24, and I got Brian Bresee. And then at 37, I got Mozzie Smith. So I've completely remade our defensive line, and I've given us one of the better defensive lines in football, I believe. Then it was time for me to finally make sure I got a linebacker, so I did take Jack Campbell, one of the best linebackers in this class. Great fit. Feeling really good about that pick personally. He was a guy who I didn't love initially, but he grew on me as time went by. I got Tippmann again, and then I made a pure value pick that people are not going to love, but I got Jahmyr Gibbs. Sorry, when the value hits you that hard, sometimes you just got to react to it. And I got Roschon, so I did get a power back as well. Trey Tucker might be an immediate slot guy, and the 6th round, great value. And then I got a little bit of secondary depth with Jacorian Bennett, who I think can play corner and safety. Excuse me. So he addresses kind of multiple needs at once. He might even be able to play a little bit of slot. And then TJ Bass is your interior offensive guard depth. So this draft is obviously spamming defensive tackle early on. You're not doing a whole lot with your edge rushers here. You are definitely hoping that Trey Tucker can drastically outproduce his draft position when he gets to the NFL. But I'll tell you, if this is the path that the draft ends up taking, I'm not going to be upset at all. Look at this line. All right, PFN, we did another one. This was another one where I took Will Anderson Jr. at 5. He is my favorite player in the draft, so I wanted to do a couple with him. And then at 20, I decided let's mix it up here. Let's do Brian Branch, a safety slash linebacker slash edge rusher slash slot corner. Best safety in the draft by far. Will make it easy to move off of Adams and Diggs after this season if we want to. Then you go Mozzie Smith to address the nose tackle position. I kind of felt obligated to take at least one blue chip nose tackle in every mock because it's such a destitute position for us right now. We literally don't have one. Then I reached a little bit, maybe, although I don't think it's a reach for Marvin Mims, who immediately becomes our slot corner. And then I addressed linebacker in the 3rd round with Daiyan Henley. Going to be a fan favorite because he's local. And I finally got us a defensive end all the way down in the 5th round with a Colby Wooden. So that's the issue with this mock, I would say, the fact that I didn't address the defensive end position until Kobe Wooden, who could go one way or the other, or Colby Wooden, excuse me. But you got to keep mixing it up here. But I did get Carl Brooks very late, and if he's a guy who can transition to playing on the interior in the NFL, I think Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden is actually a pretty decent way to address that need. And I got two power backs in Roschon and Chris Rodriguez Jr. Gonna definitely take care of the issue we had last year running in those power situations. And of course, you had Jordan McFadden to be your interior offensive line depth. He's gonna move to guard. So, didn't get to address center in this draft. There are going to be a few drafts like that, but I did want to bring in at least a little interior line depth because we're destitute there. Okay, moving along. Now, this is an NFL mock draft database, simulated mock, and this was the Anthony Richardson draft. I decided to try one with Anthony Richardson AR-15 as the number 5 pick. Maybe the scariest pick we can make, but also the most potential upside. Like, Anthony Richardson could go anywhere from a better version of Cam Newton to Jamarcus Russell very easily. So we do that, and then we are kind of obligated to address defensive line at 20. So I went with Kancey, one of my favorite players in this draft. I don't know if he's a great fit, but I do think he'll be a really good player in the NFL. Just hope he can fit in the 3-4. Drew Sanders, had to start addressing linebacker at some point. Figured this was a good place to do it. Keanu Benton, nose tackle. Benton's going to become a recurring theme in these mock drafts because it's just so important we get a legitimate nose tackle here. Did bring in one running back, but it was a nice one. Zach Charbonnet in the 3rd round's great value. We also beefed up the interior of the line a little bit with Olu Oluwatimi of Michigan. I was also able to get really good value at corner and receiver later in the draft. Parker Washington and Bryce Ford Wheaton. That's an awesome 1-2 of rookie receivers. One guy's pure potential, the other guy's ready to play the slot now. And I double dipped at nose tackle with Jared Clark, one of my favorite sleeper nose tackles. So the interior of the defense is taken care of. I even got a nice little cornerback prospect with Terrell Smith, guy I really liked. Main issue here is that you're not doing a great job on your interior defensive line necessarily because you only added the one defensive end in Kancey. But you at least hit nose tackle hard, and I really like this mock a lot personally as well. I think Olu Oluwatimi is a great scheme fit. I think that Parker Washington and Bryce Ford Wheaton, between those two, you should get one player who's really good his rookie year. And I feel like I did very well given the fact that I spent a pick on a guy who won't be ready for a while. Okay, next NFL mock draft database. Mock draft I did. Sorry, I heard something bump back there. The next mock draft database video that I did, I decided to mix it up again, and I gave you the Christian Gonzalez draft. And Christian Gonzalez, spending a pick on a cornerback is going to seem very weird to people. I'm not saying it's likely, but he's a player that I really like, and he's a player that I think is going to be a good pro. So after I took Gonzalez, had to address the defensive line at 20, so I took Kancey again. And I also took Carl Brooks later. So that's how I'm addressing the defensive end need. And the only nose tackle I took was Gerard Clark, who I like. That's probably not enough, but that may be just something that we have to live with for a year, where like nose tackle's just going to be rough. Or maybe we have to go get, maybe at some point this offseason we go get somebody like an Al Woods on a minimum deal and say, hey, we desperately need a nose tackle for one more season. And I brought in Adebawore, who may be able to help on the defensive line a little bit as well, but it's not clear what he's actually going to be in the NFL. But I really like what I did with the offensive line in this draft. I was able to get Cody Mock in the 3rd round. Not super realistic, but there you go. And I got Darnell, who is basically a 6th offensive lineman out there. Again, this is kind of a mock where you just assume that I traded Noah Fant at some point. I got Popoe, a developmental linebacker, really excited to have him. Yoshivas from Princeton at 151, great pick. Really like that guy. Admittedly, probably not ready to play a lot right now, but he could get there. And Deneric Prince at least gives you a little something extra in your backfield. I know we probably need one more running back at that point, but hey, at least it's a start. Deneric Prince, nice player. Okay, moving along here. Now we go to the Draft Network, and this I only did one mock on because their website is hideous. Like, look at this. Even on this image, you can tell, like, this is not okay. Like, you guys probably can't read what I did, but I'll just read it off. Tyree Wilson at 5. He was my pick at 5. And Bijan Robinson was my pick at 20. So I did heavily address the defensive line in this draft because I got Tyree Wilson at 5, Cansey at 38, and then Benton at 84. So I did remake our defensive line pretty heavily, and I got Trenton Simpson and Diane Henley. So that front 7 is getting addressed massively in this mock. I can say that. Oh, and while we're here, Isaiah McGuire, edge rusher. I got him in round 7. Really good value. But I didn't do a heck of a lot of anything else except for Bijan. Now, he's going to really make that backfield hum. And I don't even feel the need to get another running back that badly if I get Bijan because he's so good. And then I was able to get a little bit of line depth with Ricky Stromberg, a little bit of defensive back depth with Ja'Cory Bennett. And I was really proud of this one, Jaden Reed in the 6th round. He's a guy who I think could be ready to play the slot pretty much immediately. But again, none of this matters because you guys can't read it because the Draft Network's mock draft simulator is ugly. Ugly. But the mock draft was okay. I feel like I did an okay job salvaging some of the needs that I left unattended late in the draft. Like I was able to get a serviceable backup center. I was able to get a serviceable slot receiver. So it actually ended up coming out okay in my opinion, even though I hit the front 7 so hard. But obviously in this situation, we would probably need to find a couple of decent UDFA guards at the very least, if I had to guess. Okay, we moved on to a new site at that point because I didn't want to look at that one anymore. This was ESPN Analytics, I believe it's called. And we had a trade down here. This was one of the only mocks where I traded down from 5. Mostly because trying to trade down on most of these simulator sites was giving me a headache. But this one I did, and I got Skoronski. And this is one of the scenarios I wanted to do at least once. Because trading down a little bit from 5 and getting Skoronski to be your pretty much guaranteed blue chip left guard prospect is a very viable path in my opinion. And I was able to pick up another 2nd rounder just moving back 3 spots. Anyway, yeah, Skoronski, and then I got Brian Branch. Again, I don't need to repeat my praise of him. But once you get down to that 2nd round, I needed to get back into that front 7. That's where the problems were last year, right? So I got Brian Bresee, Keanu Benton, and late in the draft I even got Cameron Young. So those are all 3 guys who I think are going to make at least some contributions as rookies. Then Jack Campbell is my linebacker in this one. You got, let's see, Nate Dell and Luke Whippler to help the offense out a little bit. Abani Kanda, running back from Pittsburgh. Really proud of being able to get him at least once because he tested so well. I think it's time to acknowledge the fact that he's very likely to go at least by this point in the draft. And I also got Chris Rodriguez Jr., so the running back situation is completely taken care of. I got a developmental quarterback in DTR. Wanted to get him at least once. So I like this one a lot. I mean, Skoronski, don't sleep on him. The only thing I didn't really do in this draft, I feel like maybe I didn't do a great job addressing corner, but I got Brian Branch, so what's the big deal? Maybe I could have used another guard for depth, but this doesn't... I think I did a pretty good job, given the fact that I traded down from 5, which I know a lot of Seahawks fans are going to dislike very strongly. Next up, we have another draft that I did on ESPN. This one was another Anthony Richardson draft. I wanted to do a couple because it's such a pertinent possibility. In my opinion, it is the QB draft that we most likely do. And then I decided, you know what? Let's just build the offense. Screw the defense. Pete can marinate in the stew that he created. Let's get Bijan at 20 and Tippmann at 37. You are getting the best running back in the class, and in my opinion, the guy who has the most upside at center in this draft. And I didn't stop there, by the way. I got Rashee Rice and Bryce Ford Wheaton later on. So you're building the future of the offense out really well, but you're still addressing nose tackle, Keanu Benton and Jared Clark. You're getting a decent depth defensive end in Cameron Young, and Dorian Williams can be at least depth at linebacker, and you got a safety. So obviously, this draft is going to leave you wanting at the defensive end position. This draft is not doing a great job addressing your defensive back needs necessarily, although Jordan Battle's nice. But I think this draft does a really nice job of setting the stage for the future of your offense. Okay, now we moved on to FanSpeak, and this is a site that I actually like a pretty good amount. I think they have a pretty good mock draft simulator. So we did a couple over there, and I brought back the old fan favorite at number 5 with Jalen Carter, and Mazi Smith, and Adi Adibawore, and Jared Clark, and Jalen Redmond. So hammering pretty hard on that front 7 need in this one, as you can see. It continues to be, in my opinion, the most likable path that the Seahawks can take in this draft. So, spent a lot of picks on that front 7. Also, by the way, I should throw in Trenton Simpson, who I'm sad I couldn't get more than I did because I like him so much. But I decided to throw the curveball here with a JSN, who is a guy who I'm not a huge fan of, and I don't really like him that much at 20. But I wanted to do one with him because a lot of people do like him. And I'm not ruling it out as a possibility if he's there at 20. He is well respected. Did the double dip at running back again with Roschon and Evan Hull and Jacorian Bennett for good measure. And by the way, I want to reiterate this. Jacorian Bennett can play corner, slot corner, and safety. So you are getting some nice versatility there with those with him. So you are kind of addressing your needs in the secondary in more ways than one. So this mock is, I would say, pretty good at addressing all the immediate and obvious needs. You just have to like the players. Like, Jalen Redmond is a guy who is very talented, but the light bulb hasn't gone on yet. Just the kind of guy I like to get in round 7. But to expect him to do a lot of things as a rookie might be a little bit ambitious. Okay, we got one more. And this one ended up being quite possibly, and partially because the results were not super realistic, maybe my favorite one that I did. CJ Stroud at 5, my QB1. CJ Stroud QB1. Get him at 5. Not realistic, but the simulator gave him to me once. I'm not going to question it. And then you got Cansey at 20. Had to address defensive line at that point. And then I did it again with Mazi Smith. And then I did it with Zach Pickens, one of my favorite defensive line sleepers in this draft. Jack Campbell, linebacker from Iowa. Should slot in very well in this defense if we need him that rookie year. Marvin Mims in the 4th round and Emil Ekiyor Jr. in the 5th. Both those guys might start on the offense year 1 and be upgrades over what we would have otherwise had. Chris Smith in the 5th round, great value. And then I double dipped at running back, and in my opinion, pretty much addressed the running back need for this year with utilizing a 6th and a 7th round pick. Like, there were mock drafts I did here where I got Bijan at 20, and don't get me wrong, Bijan's incredible. I'm not saying anything about that, but there are these mocks I do where I address the running back need in the 6th and 7th round. So that's probably going to be a little more appetizing to a lot of Seahawks fans. Okay. Those are all the mock drafts that we did last night. Just wanted to quickly go over them. Let me know what your favorites are. Let me know what you thought of them. Let me know if there are any you really didn't like. I'm sure there's at least one. There's probably a couple that I don't like so much here. You can probably figure out which ones based off the way I was talking about them. And might see you guys later. Might not. But tomorrow's the big day. So hope to see you guys later on. Hope to see you guys tomorrow. And go Hawks.